If this is your very first time visiting the channel, then before we dive into today's story, take just a second to hit that subscribe button and leave a like on the video. Your support genuinely keeps this channel alive. Every like, every comment, every subscription helps me continue sharing powerful, emotional, real-life stories that remind us just how unpredictable life can be. Because sometimes, the moments that change everything in our lives don't begin with drama. They don't start with chaos. They don't even begin with anything memorable. Sometimes they begin on the most painfully ordinary days imaginable. And today's story is exactly that kind of story. A quiet evening. A normal routine. A moment that seemed insignificant at first. But that single moment slowly unraveled something much deeper. Something none of us in that house had been ready to confront. And looking back now, I realized that what happened that evening didn't just change one awkward moment in my life. It changed the way my entire family understood each other. Because sometimes the smallest incidents shine a light on the biggest emotions we've been hiding. This is the story of the evening that quietly changed everything. The day itself wasn't remarkable in any way. It was one of those days that disappears into the background of memory. The kind of day you'd struggle to describe even hours later. Nothing special happened at school. Nothing dramatic happened at home. Even the weather felt ordinary, like it had no intention of becoming part of any meaningful memory. The sky that evening was slowly fading into one of those soft sunsets where the orange glow spreads gently across the horizon before disappearing into a deep blue twilight. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. But it was peaceful. And sometimes peace can be deceptive. Because life has a strange habit of hiding its biggest turning points inside the most normal moments. By the time the sun had begun sinking toward the horizon, I had already started my usual jogging routine. Running had become my escape over the past few years. Not because I loved it. In fact, most of the time my legs felt like bricks halfway through the run. My lungs burned. My muscles screamed. But running did something important for my mind. It cleared it. It gave me space to think, or sometimes to stop thinking entirely. That evening's run had been particularly exhausting. The air was warm, the road stretched endlessly ahead, and every step felt heavier than the last. By the time I finally returned home, sweat clung to my skin. My shirt was soaked. My legs felt like they might collapse underneath me at any moment. And the only thing I wanted in that moment was a long, hot shower. The kind of shower that melts away exhaustion. The kind that makes the world feel slower, simpler, quieter. When I walked through the front door, the house greeted me with silence. At first, that wasn't unusual. But something about that silence felt different. Heavier. Hollow. There are two types of quiet in a house. One is peaceful, comfortable. The kind where you feel safe. The other kind is different. It's the kind that makes you pause at the doorway. The kind that makes the air feel slightly colder. And that evening, the silence leaned toward the second kind. My aunt and cousin weren't home, which wasn't strange by itself. But the house had carried a different kind of quiet ever since my uncle passed away 3 years earlier. Before his death, the house had always been loud. There had been constant chatter. Laughter echoing through the hallways. Arguments over what to cook for dinner. Random jokes that made no sense but somehow became family traditions. The kitchen used to be the heart of everything. You could always hear the clatter of pots and pans. The sound of someone humming while cooking. The voices of people talking over each other. But after my uncle passed away, something changed. The house didn't become empty, but it did become quieter. As if life itself had been turned down to a lower volume. We were all still there. But the energy was different. And although none of us said it out loud, we all felt it. I tossed my running clothes into a corner and grabbed a towel. Without thinking much about anything, I headed straight into the bathroom. The moment the warm water touched my skin, I felt the tension of the day begin to fade. Steam filled the small room. The sound of the water hitting the tiles created a steady rhythm that drowned out every other thought in my mind. For a few minutes, the world outside the bathroom didn't exist. No responsibilities. No worries. No memories trying to sneak into my head. Just warm water. And silence. I stayed in that shower longer than usual. Partly because I was tired. but mostly because it felt like the one place where everything slowed down. Little did I know that the moment I stepped outside that bathroom, things were about to become unexpectedly complicated. When I finally turned off the water and wrapped a towel around myself, I assumed the house was still empty. I stepped out of the bathroom casually, still drying my hair, still relaxed, still thinking I was completely alone. But the moment I walked into the family room, I froze. My aunt was sitting on the couch. Next to her, my cousin. Both of them were looking directly at me. And in that instant, my heart jumped straight into my throat. The embarrassment hit instantly. Not because of the towel itself, but because of the shock. The sudden realization that I had walked into a room I thought was empty, when it absolutely wasn't. There's a strange difference between being unprepared and being embarrassed. And in that moment, I felt both at the same time. My brain scrambled to process the situation. I muttered something. Probably an apology. Maybe an awkward greeting. Honestly, I don't even remember what I said. All I remember is grabbing my clothes and rushing toward my room as quickly as possible. I shut the door behind me and leaned against it. My breathing was heavier than it should have been. Not from running, but from pure awkwardness. I told myself it was nothing. Just a small, awkward moment. Something everyone would forget by tomorrow. But as I sat on my bed, staring at the floor, a strange thought crept into my mind. Why did it feel bigger than it should have? Why did that tiny moment feel uncomfortable in a way I couldn't explain? I shook the thought away, changed my clothes, and convinced myself the whole thing would be forgotten by morning. But life rarely lets us forget the moments we want to ignore. Over the next few days, something began to feel slightly different in the house. Not dramatically different, just subtly. I started noticing small things. Glances that lingered a second longer than usual. Conversations that paused unexpectedly. Moments where someone seemed like they were about to say something, but decided not to. None of these things were obvious. Individually, they meant nothing. But together, they created a strange tension. Like background noise that never completely goes away. My cousin still joked with me. My aunt still talked to me like always. But something about the energy felt slightly off. And the more I noticed it, the more my mind replayed that awkward moment over and over again. A few nights later, I was sitting in my room playing an online adventure game. The lights were dim. Headphones covered my ears. The digital world on my screen had completely pulled my attention away from reality. For a while, everything felt normal again. Until the door opened. My cousin stepped inside. She smiled the same teasing smile she always used whenever she caught me gaming. She made a joke about how I spent too much time in virtual worlds. Then she sat beside me and started watching the game. At first, everything felt normal. She asked questions about the story, pointed at the screen, made fun of my character's decisions. But beneath the surface, there was something unspoken between us. Not something inappropriate. Not romantic. Just awkwardness. The kind that appears when two people suddenly become aware of something they never thought about before. There are strange moments in life when people you've known for years suddenly feel unfamiliar. Not because they've changed, but because your perspective shifts. That night felt like one of those moments. We still talked. We still laughed. But every conversation felt slightly more careful. Every joke felt slightly more measured. It was like we were both walking around an invisible wall neither of us knew how to address. And neither of us wanted to bring up the moment that created it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something. That awkward moment wasn't the real problem. The house had been carrying tension long before that. Ever since my uncle passed away, grief had quietly settled into our daily lives. But instead of talking about it, we avoided it. Everyone tried to stay strong. Everyone tried to act normal. But the silence slowly became a habit. And habits can hide emotions for a very long time. One evening, long after dinner, my aunt called me into the den. Her voice was calm, soft, but there was something heavy behind it. I expected her to mention the awkward moment, but she didn't. Instead, she started talking about something much deeper. She talked about my uncle, about how losing him had changed her, about how she tried to stay strong for everyone, but how sometimes, strength turns into silence. And silence slowly becomes distance. She admitted something that surprised me. She said the house hadn't felt alive since he passed away. Not because we didn't care, but because we had stopped talking about the things that mattered. As I listened to her speak, something finally clicked in my mind. The awkward moment in the living room wasn't the real issue. It was simply the spark that exposed everything we had been avoiding. We weren't communicating. We weren't sharing our feelings. We were simply existing in the same space, without truly connecting. And sometimes life uses the strangest moments to reveal the biggest truths. After that conversation, something began to shift in the house. Not overnight, but gradually. Dinner conversations became longer. Laughter started returning. My cousin and I joked around again like we used to. The awkwardness didn't disappear instantly, but it slowly transformed into understanding. We stopped pretending everything was fine, and started supporting each other more openly. The house began to feel warmer again, alive again. Looking back now, I realize something important. Sometimes the moments we wish had never happened are the moments that push us toward healing. That awkward evening could have stayed just an embarrassing memory, but instead it became the moment that forced our family to reconnect, to talk, to heal, and to remember that silence doesn't solve pain. Connection does. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real, powerful life experiences, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. And if this story meant something to you, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one.